Today is the first day of President Biden's term in office. I wish him well. His nominees for cabinet positions so far have been superb. I will be critical. I know there will be times that I'll be critical. And I hope that President Biden is allowed to govern and put his agenda forward in the first days of administration rather than to go backwards and try to put former President Trump on trial. Big mistake. You'll hear why on the Dershow. Today is Joe Biden's day. He becomes the 46th president of the United States, and we all wish him well. President Trump, without mentioning his name, prayed for the new administration. I think we all, whether we pray or just hope, share a common goal that the next 4 years will be 4 good years, 4 years in which the pandemic is defeated, 4 years where the economy recovers, 4 years where people go back to work and go back to school in person, 4 years of a return to normalcy. It's hard for me to imagine a better president for a return to normalcy than Joe Biden. You know, I've known Joe for President Biden. I'm sorry, I shouldn't call him Joe anymore. I've known him for more than 40 years. And I've always liked him. I've always thought he was a decent, basically good person. And I think that he is a centrist. He is a person of common sense. And so far, the choices he's made for cabinet positions are absolutely superb. Now, those who are strongly opposed to the Clinton administration and to the Obama administration will say, well, it's a return to the bad old days. No, I don't think that's right. I know some of the people who have been selected for his cabinet. The top 4 positions are very, very important, of course. State, Treasury, Attorney General are the 3 probably most important positions in the government. Defense, of course, is very important as well. I know Tony Blinken. He's the new Secretary of State. He's very, very smart. His stepfather was a friend of mine, a Holocaust survivor, who was France's leading lawyer. And in fact, we used to tease each other because Sam Pizarre was known as the French Alan Dershowitz, and I was complimented when people called me the American Sam Pizarre. Sam was the go-to lawyer in France. He represented many of the most prominent figures. He was a great civil liberties lawyer, and Tony was essentially brought up both by his original biological father and by his stepfather when his mother remarried Sam Pizarre. So I have a lot of confidence in Tony Blinken. He's very calibrated, very cautious. He said yesterday in his testimony in front of the Senate that we're not ready to go back to the Iran deal. Iran has to show that it is in compliance, and he wants to make the deal longer and stronger. And I think that's very important. And that basically does defy President Obama, who I think would probably jump back into the deal instantaneously. I'm a little nervous because the Undersecretary of State, Wendy Sherman, is the one who negotiated the Iran deal. And I don't know what her views are. I'm waiting to hear her testify whether she thinks that the Iran deal should not be re-entered unless it's longer and stronger. Let me explain what I mean by longer and stronger. Right now, the deal ends in a few years, and they would be lawfully authorized to develop nuclear weapons. That can't be acceptable. And so it has to be longer. It can't have a sunset provision within any of our lifetimes. It has to go at least 25 years, I would think. And second, stronger, every rational person knows that Iran is now developing nuclear weapons. They are moving in that direction. They always were. There was never a moment in time when they stopped trying to develop nuclear weapons, even though the deal, the Iranian deal, says we reaffirm that we will never under any circumstances seek to acquire or develop nuclear weapons. That was always a lie, and everybody had to know that. From the moment the deal was signed, they were cheating, and now they're cheating even openly. They're developing material that only can be used for weaponization. So I'm satisfied with Tony Blinken. You're going to hear criticisms of him here too. I criticize everybody. That's my job, and I get criticized a lot. So we live in a world of criticism and counter criticism. But I'm very satisfied with Tony Blinken. Janet Yellen, of course, who is the Secretary of the Treasury, grew up a few blocks away from me in Brooklyn, so that can't be all bad. Brilliant woman, first female to be in that high position. She comes with the highest recommendations and qualifications and experience, and I'm comfortable that she'll be able to do a good job. I think the outgoing Secretary of the Treasury has done a superb job, and I think she'll be a good replacement. My favorite appointee is, of course, Attorney General Merrick Garland, student at Harvard Law School, a brilliant guy, law clerk on the Supreme Court, all the credentials, Court of Appeals judge. He was the guy who was deprived of a Supreme Court nomination. He was nominated by Barack Obama 8 months before Obama left office, and yet the Republicans, led by McConnell, said, no, that's too close to the election. We have a policy. We have a principle. We won't allow anybody to be nominated 8 months before the election because the new president should be picking the nominee. And then what happened when President Trump nominated a justice just a few weeks before the election? Suddenly McConnell got political amnesia, along with many of his colleagues, and forgot what they had said 4 years earlier, and they rushed the nomination of Justice Barrett through in violation of their own precedent in the Merrick Garland case. So now Merrick Garland will serve as the Attorney General of the United States. One of the reasons it's such a good choice is because he's a moderate. He is not a leftist. He is a moderate. He's tough on law and order. Attorney generals maybe should be. The Trump administration yesterday issued a final declaration on criminal justice, a very good one, about how not to use the criminal law as a substitute for kind of civil liability, but to make sure that the criminal law is reserved for real crimes with people who really have the intent and the knowledge that they're committing a crime. But an attorney general being tough on crime is not necessarily a vice, just like a defense attorney being tough on prosecutors isn't a vice. So Merrick Garland, I think, will be a very good attorney general. His integrity is above reproach. He will not be Joe Biden's guy. I don't even think they know each other. They've probably met, but he's not his guy. Unlike what we've had in the past when John Kennedy appointed his brother to be Attorney General of the United States, when President Reagan appointed his personal lawyer to be Attorney General of the United States, when Barack Obama appointed a close personal friend and associate to be the Attorney General of the United States. And, of course, President Trump appointed a number of people to be Attorney General of the United States, none of whom he seemed to get along with, because the job of the Attorney General is impossible. On the one hand, he's a cabinet member. He's supposed to be loyal to the President of the United States, supposed to help him get reelected. On the other hand, he's the chief law enforcement officer. He's supposed to be loyal only to justice and not to any particular person. We're one of the very few countries in the world that merge the two jobs. In most other Western democracies, you have somebody who's in the cabinet who is an advisor to the president on legal matters, and then you have a separate person who is the chief prosecuting official, sometimes called the director of public prosecution, or a name like that, often a civil service job, so as to take it out of politics. But Merrick Garland, I think, will be able to maneuver those two roles and make sure that they don't conflict. One hopes. There are always problems and always possibilities that things could go wrong. And then the president himself, I mean, he is a moderate. He does reject extremism on all sides. He's opinionated. He has strong views. But he's a man who I think tends to move toward the center. I think that's why he got the nomination. And I think that's why he got elected. I think his election is a mandate to move to the center, a mandate away from extremes. Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination. He got the nomination. He's a centrist. And I think he won the election because people wanted to see a return to the center, a return to normalcy, a movement away from the kind of divisiveness that President Trump admittedly creates. I mean, he does say either on your side or on my side. There's nobody in the middle. With President Trump, you really had to pick sides. With President Obama, I think there'll be more willingness to reach out across the aisle, more of a willingness to work with the other side. We're going to see how that gets tested in the Senate. We have a zealot who is now the majority leader of the Senate, a partisan. Chuck Schumer, who I've known for years, also went to Harvard Law School, is a zealot. And would you call him an extremist? No, that probably is too strong a word. But he's extremely partisan. And the issue now is there's a 50-50 split in the Senate. Now, that doesn't mean the Senate is Democrat. It means it's 50-50. When it comes to votes, the vote gets decided, if it's 50-50, by the president of the Senate, who is the vice president of the United States, a liberal Democrat. So to that extent, the Democrats do control the Senate. But in the past, when there have been 50-50 divisions, arrangements were made where some power would be given to people on both sides. Obviously, the ultimate power goes to the majority leader, and the majority leader will be Schumer. He will determine essentially the agenda and the timing. It's an extraordinarily powerful position, being majority leader, as we saw with McConnell, as we saw with his unwillingness to bring forward the Merrick Garland nomination. I'm curious to how the confirmation hearings for Attorney General will go, because I can't imagine that Merrick Garland is thrilled with the way the Senate treated him last time around, but I predict he's not going to show any anger that he might have. He's going to look forward and see whether or not he can work together with the Democratic majority and the Republican, you want to call it a minority, or half and half with a tie-breaking vote. So it's going to be interesting. And of course, what do you think is going to happen in the first few weeks if the Schumer people get their way? The entire agenda of President Biden will be put on hold while they engage in this futile task of trying to impeach and try. They've already impeached, but now try the former president of the United States, citizen Donald Trump. It's an absurd waste of time. It also will create a terrible precedent. Remember, in many, many European countries, and in many African countries, and in many South American countries, and in many Asian countries, when a president is defeated for office, he's, of course, put on trial. That's what we do, and sometimes executed. That's never been the tradition in the United States. We have never put a former president on trial after he lost an election. We didn't put Richard Nixon on trial after he was forced to resign as the result of a clearly impeachable offenses and the votes against him. It would have been the easiest thing in the world. It would have taken just a week. They could have put him on trial. They could have impeached him. They could have prevented him from ever running. And people say, oh, well, he couldn't run for president. It doesn't mean he couldn't run for Congress. John Quincy Adams served in Congress for many years after he was president. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that William Howard Taft served as Chief Justice of the United States after he served as president. So there could have been situations where previous presidents like Nixon could have been tried after they left office. We've never done it, and we shouldn't do it now. First of all, it's unconstitutional. It's just unconstitutional. The Constitution, as you've heard on the show before, provides that the purpose of impeachment is removal. If you remove them, you can also add the sanction of future disqualification, but you can't just try somebody to disqualify them. If you could try me and you if you're over 35, or the next nominee that the Republicans put forward. As soon as he throws his hat in the ring, they impeach him and say, no, you can't run now, ha, ha, ha. That's not the way the Constitution was designed. Also, if the president is put on trial after he leaves office, does the Chief Justice preside? If the Chief Justice doesn't preside, who does preside? The Constitution says the Chief Justice must preside. when a president's on trial. Does that mean a former president? Of course the framers never thought of it, because it never occurred to anybody to put a former president on trial. Some state constitutions allowed that, but the framers of our Constitution didn't include that. So does the Chief Justice preside? If not, who presides? Well, probably then the President of the Senate, who may be running for election in 2024. What a conflict of interest. She is going to preside over a trial in order to prevent her competitor from running against her in 2024. I mean, I don't wish Joe Biden one term, but he is, after all, almost my age. And the possibility, at least, that he doesn't run in 2024 and that his vice president runs, is a high likelihood. And for her to preside, well, obviously the reason that we had the Chief Justice presiding is because there would be a conflict if you had the President of the Senate presiding, because the President of the Senate is in part of the order of replacement of a president. So they try to work it out so a person who's non-political, non-partisan, the Chief Justice of the United States, would preside. We don't know the answer to that question because the question has never been put before. So if I were President Biden, first thing I would be doing is calling Chuck Schumer and say, hey, come on, this isn't fair to me. It isn't fair to the American public. We need 24/7 attention of the United States Senate to the pandemic. We need 24/7 to restoring the economy. We need 24/7 to getting people back to work, getting schools open. We need 24/7 to worry about China, to worry about Iran. The idea of allocating so much time, and believe me, it won't only be the morning, because when you have a trial of a former president, it will suck the air out of the room. It will not leave any time or any place for anything else to get done. You may get a few confirmations through here and there, but remember, every senator must be on the floor at all time during the trial. Senators can't leave. They're there. They're the jury. They can't just leave and go and attend to other business. So terrible mistake for the Democrats to be frittering away their mandate in the first days of the new term by going back to old business rather than moving forward to new business. So by the time you watch this show, President Biden will have been sworn in. He will be the president of the United States. He will be in charge of the United States in every executive manner. It will be his time, his administration. And my hope and my prayer is that he uses it effectively for the benefit of all Americans, not just for the benefit of his party. He's not that kind of guy. So I'm sure deep down he wishes that the President Trump hadn't been impeached and that the trial would not go forward. But he also has a base, and he also has to deal with his senators and his congressmen. Remember, Congress overwhelmingly voted to impeach, all the Democrats and some Republicans. So there's pressure on President Biden to move forward with the impeachment. I hope he resists that pressure. I hope the Senate sees the right way and understands that it is unconstitutional. I will not be presenting that argument in front of the United States Senate, but I will be presenting that argument in the court of public opinion, including on the Dershow. So you've heard my views today on our new president, and now I want to hear your views. And I know many of you have been favorable to President Trump. I know my audience is divided, as it should be. Please give President Biden a fair chance, an open mind, but send me your comments, send me your questions, send me your criticisms of the Biden administration. I just hope that that congresswoman who said she would introduce a resolution to impeach President Biden on the day he gets into office thinks better of it. The weaponization of impeachment for partisan political purposes should not be done by either side. So let's turn now to our viewers, our listeners, and your questions and comments on the Dershow. We turn now to our callers and listeners. Let's hear from our first caller.
I think what you pointed out is a loophole the framers left in the Constitution. You cannot remove a president who is not there. They did not think of the end of term, is what I'm thinking. The question still remains, can you run for office? So I would think a trial would be needed. The impeachment is part of our check and balance system. Impeachment is also similar to a grand jury finding adequate evidence for a trial. So your reasons would give President Trump a free pass not to be tried. How should President Trump be treated in your view? Thank you.
It's a good question. President Trump should be treated in the marketplace of ideas. If you don't like him, don't vote for him. If you think what he did was terrible on the 2 weeks ago Wednesday, say so. I've said so. But the idea that impeachment is a check and balance, of course, is correct. It's a check and balance on a sitting president. It's not a check and balance on the political process. The idea that the Senate can decide who runs for president is absurd, except if it's part of a removal process. So respectfully, I disagree.
Hi, my name is Jay Kofsky. I'm calling from Long Island. I have a question for Professor Dershowitz. There seems to be a group of people who were waved in by security. I've seen video on Twitter of security literally taking down the barricades and waving them in. Again, it's hard to tell who did what where. Would those people be subject to trespass if they were waved? And again, if they did anything violent, those people, different name. But if they were waved in by security and then went into the Capitol building, would those people have a legitimate defense?
It's a great question, and the answer was given by the Supreme Court of the United States in a case, I think it's called Raley versus Ohio. I haven't thought about that case in 30 years, but cases pop into my head. I have a memory for cases. Raley versus Ohio, in which basically a police officer waved a person essentially through a red light, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't prosecute somebody if the police or people in authority have told him to do it. So if there were evidence that people in authority waved somebody past security, that would be an absolute constitutional defense.
Greetings, Mr. Dershowitz. I just discovered the show yesterday, which would have been Monday, Martin Luther King Day, when you were on the Greg Kelly program on Newsmax. My question for you is this. I think at this point, we're beyond, was the election stolen? We're beyond that. I feel like we're in a worse situation, and that is if they can cancel a president from social media, what can they do to us if they disagree with us? They can shut us down, and I don't like that. I'm very much a free speech guy. How do we stop this? How do we stop the AOCs that are wanting stricter laws on speech and deprogramming anyone who voted for Donald Trump? What do we do to stop it? Because this is against everything that we believe as Americans. If I don't like something, I don't watch it or I don't listen to it. I'm not going to call up some station and say, cancel the show because I find it offensive. I just don't watch it. Thank you for your time, sir.
I agree with every single thing you've said. We do live in a cancel culture. I'm actually beginning to write a new book on how to fight back against the restrictions on free speech, which I see coming and getting much worse. People like AOC and many in her generation, not all, we can't generalize, many in her generation have no appreciation for free speech. They know the truth. They know everything. Why do you have to have dissent? Why do you have to have due process? If a woman accuses a man, of course she has to be telling the truth, except, of course, if the man accused is Joe Biden or Martin Luther King, then we have different rules that apply. But if it's a bad person or a Republican or somebody we don't like, or just an ordinary privileged white male, why do we need trials? Why do we need due process? Why do we need an adversarial proceeding? We know women always tell the truth and men always lie. I mean, that's the kind of absurd thinking, magical thinking, that I think we're hearing on college and university campuses. If a Republican says something, it must be false. If a Democrat says it, it must be true. If AOC says it, it must be true. If somebody else says it, it must be false. We have to fight back against that. And I agree with you. I think one of the greatest dangers that we face, and it's be interesting to see how President Biden deals with it, is censorship by the social media, because they control the thought processes of America in many ways. I mean, 1984 has merged with McCarthyism. And when you get that combination, it's a disaster for free speech, for the marketplace of ideas, and for intellectual curiosity. Today, intellectual curiosity is punished if you dare deviate from the politically correct norm, and especially if you're not part of the right identity in identity politics. So we have to argue back. We have to fight back. I say fight back. People will misinterpret it and say I'm advocating violence. No, fight back means fight back in a logical, coherent, peaceful way. And we shouldn't take things out of context when people use fighting metaphors. Olive Wendell Holmes used the term fighting words, and those are protected by the Constitution. They also are protected by the culture of free speech that we have always lived by until very recently. So all of you who agree with me, let's make the Dershow the central place for fighting back against repression by the social media, repression by the government, repression by universities, repression by corporations and other firms. It's happening all over the country, and we have to resist it. And we have to show that the only place to correct falsehood is in the marketplace of ideas, not by censorship, either by government or by powerful private forces. So whatever your views, share them with me and with my viewers and listeners. Increasing numbers of viewers and listeners. We're up above 80,000 subscriptions on Rumble and many on YouTube. And please, if you're listening to the show, subscribe on Rumble or YouTube and add to our base and listen every day and send in your questions and comments, because I want to be challenged and I want to be able to respond to the challenges on the Dershow. An important part of the Dershow is your voice, your questions, your comments. Please call 24/7. The number is 216-710-0050. Keep your comments short and to the point. Again, the number for you to call 24/7 is 216-710-0050. Hard questions, criticisms, everything's fine. Just keep your questions short, and I'll answer them all on the Dershow.